Aloha, I'm Chef Ronnie from Tiki's Grill and Bar in Waikiki. Welcome to Kids Cooking Local. Today we're gonna make a rotini pasta salad with chicken. We're gonna start by cooking the rotini. Salted boiling water. Most recipes specify to have the water boiling through the whole process. Most recipes say to cook the pasta completely through boiling. It's to roll the starch into the water and to cook the pasta properly. If it's 90 degrees outside, like it is in Hawaii a lot, then I often turn the thing off halfway through, cover it, but just make sure it doesn't all stick together. You could put a little oil, olive oil, or vegetable in the water to keep it from boiling over. Once the starch and the water combine, it'll get foamy, especially on a big commercial stove. Okay, we're gonna prepare the vegetables. It's a salad, so these vegetables aren't gonna get cooked. Some are and some aren't. The recipe just calls for chopped celery. To me, chopped is vague. I'm just going to dice it kind of small. I don't want really huge pieces in my pasta salad. I don't cut the end off when I cut something. To me, that's the handle. People automatically, like somebody already cut the end off of this. I would have left the nub on the end of it. That gives you 100% product usage. It's more economical because you're not going to eat that part. Instead of cutting it off, you'd use it as the handle. Okay, diced celery. Depending on the size you want it, go lengthwise. Same thing, if this celery had the leaves on it, same thing, I would leave that on, cut what I want, and then discard the rest. In a restaurant, we save all of that when we make stock. We save all of those mirepoix scraps to make stock. Real simple cut. Can you see my fingers? So I'm keeping my fingertips down. We're taught that in culinary school, using my knuckles to guide the knife. So my fingertips are not that was the very end of my vegetable. Okay. Celery. Make sure my pasta's not boiling over or sticking. This recipe calls for cook to instructions on the box for the pasta. This rotini says 7 minutes to al dente. Al dente is to the teeth, so it still has some bite in it. That's always how you cook pasta when you're certainly making it for a hot dish. What I was taught when you're making a macaroni or pasta salad is you cook it further through to it's a little more tender. It's going to suck up all the mayonnaise, and then it might actually end up being dry if the pasta's not cooked quite enough. When I make macaroni salad at work, we actually do that process, let it suck up the mayonnaise, and then sometimes end up adding more at the end. This recipe calls to leave it in the refrigerator and then put the cashews on, afterwards because of that, because it's going to suck everything up. Okay, carrot. This recipe calls for 1/2 cup. The skin protects it, so I'll just leave some of that skin on so when it goes back in the refrigerator, wrap it in plastic wrap or put it in a Ziploc bag. I wouldn't put carrot peels in my stock. Carrot peels are bitter. That's the part that was in the ground. Even though you wash them, they're going to have a bitter to them. Carrots are really sweet. You don't want the bitter from the carrot. Okay, handy grater. It says shredded carrot. These things will take your knuckles off. Don't have your knuckles anywhere near it. If I was using this entire carrot for a recipe, I certainly would have left the end on because that would have been my handle the entire way. A little bit vague. It could be big shredded, small shredded. That's 5 minutes on the pasta on my timer. So for 7 minutes of al dente, I want to go probably more like 9 minutes. So I'm going to wait 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to add the snap peas that I'm going to cut. Raw carrots and celery, when they have vinegar and mayonnaise, there's vinegar in mayonnaise, and this recipe has vinegar. It's going to pickle it. The salt is going to draw the water out of it. It's all going to get soft. I think it's better to have the bigger cut on this so it doesn't feel too, so it still has some mouthfeel and texture to it. Or snow peas, this recipe calls for peas. Snow peas would work just as well. It says to cut them into a snow pea, you would peel out the string on the end of it because that's chewy. On these, I don't think it's necessary. It says simply to cut them into inch pieces. I would say that's about in half for these. They are going to be blanched. So I'm going to actually put these into the water now. It's a simple enough recipe. It says to do it in the last minute or so of cooking. You don't want to overcook the snow peas or snap peas. They'll turn brown and lose their texture. In this recipe, we don't necessarily want them raw either. One of the other raw ingredients is red onion. Red onion is a sweet onion or a Bermuda onion, Spanish onion. It's going to add a great crunch to the recipe. This recipe calls for a half a cup. This onion is essentially peeled already, but this outer membrane is chewy. To me, it's about economics. I wouldn't throw anything edible away in a recipe like this. So you can see that's nice and clean, that part of it. A half a cup is probably a little more than half of this onion. Again, you can see how my fingers are. I'm keeping them away from the blade of the knife. When I cook with a sweet onion, I don't make it too small. I want to taste the crunch, feel the crunch, and taste the onion. So I made horizontal cuts, and now I'm making more vertical cuts, parallel, exploiting the layers in the onion. Save that for another recipe. Half a cup of onion. We want to drain the pasta really good. We don't want to have an excess of water in there. Whatever's in there with that pasta is going to get sucked up. Whatever liquid ingredients are going to get sucked up. If you leave a bunch of water in there, that's going to get sucked up too into the pasta and dilute the flavor. Always salt your pasta water. Whenever you cook pasta, always salt the water. Make it taste like the ocean. The potential for your dish to get bland is there. Even if you season everything in the bowl and the pasta doesn't have anything in it, it'll taste under-seasoned. Okay, next is my fork. So this is the canned chicken. This recipe calls for 2 cans. It says simply to break it up with a fork. I don't want it to be too small like baby food. I want to be able to taste the pieces of chicken. So I'd say that's good. Okay, so now this part of the recipe is essentially the vinaigrette or the dressing for it. It says to mix the final ingredients. So we have all of our other ingredients in the bowl except for the cashews that are going to go on top. Now we're going to make the dressing. And that's quite simply mayonnaise, brown sugar, cider vinegar, and a teaspoon of salt the recipe calls for. Anyone that cooks at home in a restaurant, you taste everything at the end for salt. Don't ever rely on a recipe for the amount of salt that it says. Adjust it to your tastes, but don't make your food too salty. Again, it's important to salt the water for the pasta so you don't have to add too much salt at the end as well, and the taste is thorough through the pasta. Okay, so mayonnaise, 1 cup. Okay. Tablespoon of cider vinegar. This recipe says to refrigerate this after and then put the cashews on top. Keep in mind that what we're doing right here is the beginning of that step. And again, the acid and oh, I didn't add salt. Teaspoon of salt. Salt, the vinegar, and the vinegar inside the mayonnaise is going to draw liquid out of all the other ingredients. And then the pasta is going to suck all that up. Home, when you're cooking pasta, you always save some of the pasta water so you can add it back as it keeps sucking it up so your pasta's not dry. And then you compensate with fat, and in most cases is olive oil with pasta. Pasta, what's the fat in this pasta? It's mayonnaise. Plating. If you're serving this at home to your family, mound it up nice and high. Everything looks better when it's all mounded up nice and high, like they do on TV. Cashews, it calls for 1 cup of cashews, I believe. 1 cup, and those, so this would go into the refrigerator for a couple of hours. I didn't taste it. Spot on. Do that before it comes out of the bowl. And then cashews on top.
Hi Chef, my name is Jonathan. I was wondering why you use the pasta water instead of just new fresh water.
When you add pasta water back to a pasta dish, you mean?
Yeah.
So that has the starch and the salt and the flavor from the pasta in it, which are all pleasant things. You could just add water. The pasta water has all the things that are already in the dish and accent the flavors.
I noticed that you peeled the carrot because the peel is bitter. Do you recommend peeling all other vegetables?
It definitely depends on the vegetable. Like the onion, you take the outer peel off. I would say that if it's a vegetable that grows in the ground, like a beet, you'd want to peel it. You roast it and slide the skin off. Most things you would peel, but you certainly wouldn't take the skin off of a bell pepper. That's almost impossible, right? It definitely depends on the vegetable, how it was grown, and the taste of the peel.
I saw that you use canned meat. Is there any other meats that you recommend using?
You should definitely, if you could get fresh chicken, local chicken, people like organic these days. Costco has rotisserie chickens. Like you could use any kind of a chicken for this dish, but as a staple and in your pantry in your house, if you're putting something together, just using the basis of this recipe, you could certainly easily modify it just with things that are in your cabinet. So I think that's kind of the reason for using a canned product, because of its availability. Definitely use some fresh roasted or grilled chicken in the future for a recipe like this.
All recipes can be personalized, but I was wondering if you could modify your recipe.
Any recipe can be personalized or modified. Recipes are guidelines. You can look anything up these days. You could take a recipe like this and certainly modify it with anything that you can get fresh and local at a market or your local supermarket, something you grow in your garden. You know, I would have definitely a basil plant at my house. I would have certainly put fresh basil in that recipe simply because that's a staple in my own garden. If you had some tomatoes in your garden, you could put that too. The more fresh and local ingredients you have, the better. Keep in mind, as you're cooking anything, recipes are always a guideline. It's most important to season it properly at the end. Salt and pepper. Don't overcook your pasta. Use your own creativity. You can ad-lib anything once you have the basics of cooking. Thank you for watching Kids Cooking Local. I'm Chef Ronnie from Tiki's. We made cashew chicken rotini pasta salad. We'll see you next time.